this computer. All right. So again, I'm Jonathan Ramos from Destin High School. Again, I do believe I have the best job in this county, and that's with our weight room not being built yet, which will be done this week. But in the meantime, they always just bus us over to the CrossFit that we're renting out for our training. So let me full screen this. A topic that I just love is eccentric training. All right, I've always been into it. I've always liked it. I'm really big into that triphasic stuff as well, and some other methods of eccentric training. But I always feel that, to me, eccentrics, it's the foundation. All right, so the title is Eccentrics, a foundation for injury reduction and performance. So what is eccentric? Well, eccentric is a muscle contraction. As you guys know, we have the eccentric contraction, the isometric contraction, and the concentric contraction. Well, it's also the strongest contraction in the body. All right. By definition, all right, it's when the muscle lengthens because the contractile force is less than the resistive force. All right. It's also time under tension. All right. So we're stressing those muscles for a longer period of time than what they're typically used to. All right. And it's also the deceleration phase. All right. Typically, it's the lowering phase of an exercise. Not always. All right. Just depends on the exercise, but typically it is. But most importantly, and really the key point to this entire presentation, it's the absorption of force. All right. The absorption of force. As you know, when you're playing sports, whether you're running, you're jumping, you're hitting, whatever it is, someone's placed force upon you. You know, there's a lot of force getting placed upon the body. Can you absorb that force? All right. And I like to think of eccentric as the foundation in which the house sits on. All right. So this picture here illustrates a house that's built on a poor foundation. So what do you know what happens with the house with a poor foundation? The house is gonna fall apart. You're gonna have issues here and there. All right. If you're buying a home, or if, let's say, you flip homes, are you gonna knowingly buy a house with a poor foundation? Probably not. All right. Because all right, I'm gonna have to pay a lot more time, a lot more money, and spend a lot more time just to get that house up and ready so I could flip it or live in it. All right. It really just becomes time consuming and a money pit. All right. So you're gonna want a house with a solid, strong foundation. All right. So the age-old question: what happens when the unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Who wins? All right. This is Batman versus Joker, the unstoppable force and the immovable object. Well, that really just depends. All right. So I got a couple of videos here, one on this slide and one on the next. And just let me know if it doesn't share the videos. I gotta get it pop up first. All right. Are you guys able to see this YouTube page? All right. Hold on. Can't see that chat box. Okay, you guys can't see the YouTube page. Let me see if I can. New share, and here we go. And share. All right, what about now? Okay, awesome. All right. So here's a storm in the Caribbean here. As you know, with storms, hurricanes, tropical storms, tornadoes, very powerful, destructive, unstoppable force. There's a house and just rips off the roof like it was nothing. All right. So just the raw destructive damage. Let me exit this. Okay. Screen. Share. All right. Let me get back to my slide. All right. So I live in Florida, and we have hurricanes, which produces tornadoes. And after every storm, when I was a little kid, we would kind of drive around town to see what the damage was. A couple years ago, Panama City had that major hurricane that came through, right? Completely devastated, a Category 5. I'm driving through because I was recruiting down there, I think 2019. I was recruiting Panama City, and I'm seeing house after house destroyed, just knocked over, flattened, and then a random building standing. I'm going to Mosley High School, and I'm driving to Mosley High School. There's just trees on both sides on this long winding road, and they're all just upended, ripped out, bent in half. Just unbelievable. But why is it when a hurricane comes through or a tornado decimates all the houses in the neighborhood, but those 2 or 3 houses that are still standing that are right next to them, and it's as if nothing happened to them? Maybe they just lost a shingle and that's about it. And just like, it destroyed every house, and it's like it just avoided that house. Well, again, if you can't control the forces placed upon you, damage is done. The ability to absorb force, not only force but maximum force. All right. So the second video, and I'll make sure I get this shared as well. And I think this one's pretty cool. This deals with military testing. And let me know if you can't hear it as well. If you can, I'll just re-explain the video. Yep. Hold on. Let me close out that YouTube page there. All right. Do you still have the slide? No, screen share. All right, here we go.
Yeah, we're good now.
All right. So in that second video, military testing, had a plane, F-4 Phantom jet, flying in at 500 miles per hour into a wall, trying to see if those walls that they build, can it withstand impact of a jet flying into it or a plane crashing into it, protected nuclear material. All right. So what happened was the wall, it withstood. All right. The wall that was designed to move and absorb energy did its job. Completely destroyed the plane. The only thing left was just the tips of the wings. Everything else was dust. All right. So in the first video, unstoppable force wins. All right. Houses are destroyed. Roofs are ripped off. All right. In the second video, all right, the immovable object went. All right. So the answer to the age-old question, what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object? Well, it just depends. Can the immovable object absorb the unstoppable force? Are you able to absorb that force? If you can absorb the force, it can be redirected. All right. So now this picture, it's a nice, beautiful home that's built on a strong, sturdy foundation. All right. Now the house ain't falling apart because it has a strong, solid foundation. And that's what represents the eccentric training in the eccentric phase. All right. In the eccentric contraction. All right. So what's actually going on? The physiology of eccentric training. I got this right here in the middle of my screen. Remove that. All right. So what's actually going on within the body as we train eccentrically? All right. Eccentric training affects 2 physiological processes that contribute to force development. All right. You have the stretch reflex and the stretch shortening cycle. All right. So stretch reflex is going to consist of your muscle spindles and your Golgi tendon organs. All right. So the muscle spindles, they're going to initiate movement. All right. So they're stimulators. All right. While the Golgi tendon organs, all right, they're going to inhibit movement. All right. Think of them as your emergency cutoff switch. All right. Then you have your stretch shortening cycle. All right. It consists of the eccentric phase atomization phase, and the concentric phase. So notice, there is no stretch shortening cycle without the eccentric phase. So I talked about it being the foundation from which the house sits on. So there's no stretch shortening cycle without the eccentric phase. All right, and now we'll get more into the muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs here. So purpose of muscle spindles, again, they're going to measure changes in muscle length and the rate of change. All right, it's going to indicate how hard you must contract to overcome that force that's getting placed upon you. All right, the Golgi tendon organs, as I said, they're going to restrict movement. All right, they're going to inhibit movement. So they're going to measure changes in the force being placed on a muscle. If continued tension would cause injury, all right, then it's going to force a relaxation. So it's really there to protect you. All right, the stretch shortening cycle. The more force you can absorb, the potential for greater contraction. So I talked about that, immovable objects, unstoppable force. Can you absorb the force? If you can absorb the force, you have a chance to redirect it. All right. And then ultimately, the goal of eccentric training. All right. So we want to improve the neuromuscular synchronization of the efferent and afferent neural pathway. So really that communication pathway between the muscle spindle, central nervous system, and the muscle, while desensitizing the GTO. So we want to be able to play with higher amounts of force. All right. Eccentric training is really best with higher amounts of force compared to low loads. All right, because we want maximum absorption of force. So one, we can try to redirect that force, but then ultimately, if I could absorb that force, if I could handle the forces placed upon my body, all right, it's going to hold, it's going to stay together, it's not going to break down, something's not going to give. So what happens when you can't control the forces placed upon the body? Just like in the videos demonstrated, injury. All right, something's going to give, something's going to break down, it's going to start to fall apart. All right, so there was a study done, and this was in Europe. All right, this dealt with minor league soccer players or semi-pro soccer players in Europe. So there was 942 athletes that took part in the study. They split them into two groups. One group had 461, the other group had 481. All right, so it was a 10-week. They implemented eccentric training over a 10-week program, and the only eccentric training that they did for this program was the Nordic hamstring exercise. So you have one athlete on their knees, and they're going to slowly lower their body while the other athlete is holding the heels down. All right, and it was progressive. So they started off with one set, and then eventually after a couple of weeks went to 2 sets, and then 3 sets. All right. So with that eccentric training in that group that did the eccentric training, what they had was out of 461, they had 15 injuries. And for this study, they determined an injury would be anything to the posterior thigh region. All right, that would consist of the injury for this purpose of the study. So they had 15 injuries, 12 new, 3 reoccurring. All right, so that's at 25% recurrent injury. The other group who did 0 eccentric training, they had 52 injuries, 32 new, 20 recurrent. All right, so I was never great at math, all right, but I could add, I could subtract, and I could compare numbers. So you have 52 versus 15, 32 versus 12, 20 versus 3, all right? A rate of 62.5% recurrent injuries compared to 25%. That is a big difference, right? And just all they did, both groups, they did the normal training that you do every single year. All right, just that one group implemented eccentric training for 10 weeks, and it was just one exercise, and that was a Nordic hamstring exercise. So there was another study done here. Now this study was much smaller. All right, this was a small study. This took place in 1998, and it really more focused on the Achilles. This dealt with recreational runners. So they had 2 groups of 15, so a total of 30 in the study. One group implemented eccentric training for 12 weeks. The other group did no eccentric training. All right, just typical rehab, physical therapy training. All right, so after 12 weeks, the group that did eccentric training, they had decreased pain. There was no significant difference in their concentric or eccentric plantar flexion between their limbs. All right, they were able to return to the pre-injury running levels. All right, and it took them 3 months to full recovery. All right, the group that did no eccentric training, all right, there was still a significant difference in both concentric and eccentric plantarflexion, all right, between each limb. They did have decreased pain, so that's good. They were able to decrease their pain, but they still needed surgery, all right? They still needed to have surgery, and it took them twice as long to recover, 6 months compared to 3 months, all right? The only eccentric training that was involved for this study was straight leg calf raises and bent knee calf raises on steps, all right? That's the only eccentric training that group did, all right? And so they had decreased injury, decreased pain. They were able to return to the full running levels, recovered in half as much time. But key point, they did not need surgery. As we all know, what happens when you have surgery, all right, it's going to take your body, you're never really going to be 100%, and you're more susceptible to a reoccurring injury, all right? So a little bit of eccentric training between the two studies, all right, could be a big difference between, all right, keeping your athletes healthy, managing them through the season. Because what do we know about sports? I mean, no one's really ever 100% healthy by mid-season at the end of the year. You're going to have your bumps, you're going to have your bruises, but can you manage it? Can you keep them healthy enough to be on the field competing, compared to in the training room, sitting out 2 or 3 weeks, or having to sit out half the season, having to take 6 months to full recovery? That could be the difference between missing half your season or missing the entire season, all right? Let's have someone saying something in the chat. All right, nothing. All right, so benefits of eccentric training, all right? The most important one, the maximum absorption of force. Can you absorb that force? If I'm able to handle that force, to absorb that force, all right, less likely something's going to break, less likely something's going to tear or snap, all right? I could keep that body together and functioning, doing what it's supposed to be doing. So maximum absorption of force, all right? You'll have greater force production. Why? Because now you have an improved stretch reflex and stretch shortening cycle, all right? Enhanced acceleration and deceleration technique. So think about it. What is eccentric training? All right, it's the deceleration phase. So there's working on your deceleration technique right there. Enhanced acceleration, because now again, greater force production through your improved stretch reflex and stretch shortening cycle. Improved tissue tolerance, movement efficiency. With that improved tissue tolerance, all right, as I was doing this research for this presentation, I was reading one article, and they were doing research on eccentric training, and what they saw was that eccentric training led to increased tendon stiffness. And so they're like, man, we see this increased tendon stiffness. You know, we're definitely going to see a lot more injuries because of this tendon stiffness. But the actual opposite of that happened, all right? That increased tendon stiffness did not lead to more injuries, all right? And they're like, oh, wow. They figured that increased tendon stiffness actually just provided more stability for the joint, all right? And that's why they didn't see an increase of injuries. Selective training of your explosive type 2 muscle fibers, all right? So what do we know about resistance training, all right? Your body's only going to recruit the muscle fibers needed to get the job done, all right? If it doesn't need to tap into your type 2 muscle fibers, it's not going to do that, all right? It's only going to recruit what's needed to get the job done. Eccentric training actually flips that upside down, and it's going to recruit those type 2 muscle fibers, all right? It's going to recruit them first. So now you're thinking, I'm training my type 2 muscle fibers, all right? My fast twitch muscle fibers. I have improved stretch reflex, improved stretch shortening cycle, maximum absorption of force. What coach doesn't want athletes that are more explosive, more powerful, all right? Training them type 2 muscle fibers, improved stretch reflex, improved stretch shortening cycle. All that's going to lead to more explosive, better acceleration, more powerful athletes. All right, and then the maximum absorption of force, the more absorb back in force, less likely I'm going to have an injury, right? All right, and then you have your hypertrophy, all right, so which is time under tension. All right, so you're getting your work, your volume through that time under tension. All right, so if I'm asking someone to lower, they're doing back squat, and I say, hey, I want you to lower it, time under tension, 6 seconds, all right, eccentric phase, 6 seconds or 8 seconds or 5 seconds, compared to just a typical down up 1 second contraction. This video I think this video is pretty cool. This is kind of just illustrates the concept of the benefits of eccentric training. Now, this is from the movie X-Men First Class. I think it does a good job of just showing the ability to absorb maximum force, but not only absorb that force, to be able to redirect that force, but then also what happens when an athlete has a force placed upon them and they're not able to absorb that force. What happens then? So I'll make sure I share this as well. New share. They already have it pulled up. Share. All right. Let me know if you can't see this. All right. So it's about 2-minute video or slightly over. So powerful explosion. He's able to absorb all the force. Now he's able to explosively redirect the force. So all this force is getting placed upon him. He's able to absorb it all. And then he explosively redirects the force. One athlete places a force upon another athlete. He's able to absorb all that force. So now you have an athlete, force is applied upon him, and he's unable to absorb that force. And he's unable to absorb the force, so damage is done. Screen share. All right. Screen share. All right. So I just think that those highlights kind of demonstrate the benefits of eccentric training, again, about the ability to absorb the force, an athlete that's able to handle that force, but then explosively redirect that force, place the force upon another athlete who's unable to handle that force, and then damage is done. All right, so general guidelines prior to implementing eccentric training. So I think these are pretty important and kind of just best practices as well. You want to incorporate a general prep phase prior to starting eccentrics. The reason for that, eccentrics are very taxing on the body. It's a high level of stress. All right. You know, it really breaks down the contractile components of the muscle, but then also the structural components. So if you have an athlete that has a low training age, that has never trained eccentrically before, or is coming off a long break, you know, winter break or summer break, and you know how these athletes are when you go on these breaks. A lot of them, not all of them, but some of them don't do anything. So they essentially detrain. You know, if you just start off with the eccentric phase with them, their body might not be able to handle it. They're going to hate you. They're going to be really sore. And again, the last thing we want is to really, cause, rhabdomyolysis on an athlete or anything like that. So make sure you start do a general prep phase prior to doing eccentrics. That way they've done some resistance training, they've gotten to the flow of things, they've gotten some adaptation, they've got the body started to adapt to some stress getting placed upon it, and they'll be better prepared to handle that eccentric phase. I think of when I was at Maine, I had an athlete. He was a high jumper, track and field. He was a high jumper, and he had never trained essentially before. We just did a general prep phase. We finished that, and we'll start our eccentric phases. And he comes up to me one day and he's like, "Man, coach, man, I just don't know if I'm, recovering. Can I do a different workout and stuff like that? I just don't, think I'm performing as well as it should be. I didn't PR at this last meet, and yada yada. And I think it's the workouts." And then start talking to him. I was like, "Well, have you ever trained essentially before?" He's like, "No, this is the first time I've done it." So I was just reminding him, again, well, it is going to be a lot more stress on your body. This is why. And then, he was frustrated and really wanted to do something else, just mainly because he didn't PR. But then found out, he wasn't eating lunch or eating for 12 hours of the day. And I'm like, well, that could be what's really impacting your performance, not necessarily so much of how we're training. Well, long story short, 2 weeks later, he gets a PR. But eccentric training, it can be very taxing. So you may have some athletes coming to you afterwards and telling you, "Coach, I'm really sore. I've never been this sore in my life." And you just got to kind of remind them of the high stress that eccentrics will place upon their body. But also make sure that they're taking care of the body as well. So, but due to the high stress, you want to limit it to at first your compound exercises, your core lifts at first. But then as training experience increases, they get more training age, they get used to it. Then you can start to implement more eccentrics into all your other auxiliary lifts. All right. Example of that would be like in season, because of the high stress, because of the extra load of volume of practice and games. We'll just stick to our core lifts with the eccentric training, and then in the off season we'll implement it into everything, or essentially almost every single lift that we do in that phase on those days that we do eccentric training. Be cautious when performing eccentrics with higher loads than graded 85%, especially if you go in 6 seconds and you start going 90%, 100%, 105, 110%. Now you like I said, you can play with much higher loads, and we'll cover that in a couple slides. But it's just risk reward. If you get an athlete that tears a pec because he's doing 110%, stuff like that, or multiple athletes start having injuries, your job could be on the line. Athletes start getting hurt in the weight room, that's going to be a reflection of you, and it could put your job on the line. So it's safety and just big risk, big reward. What I would say prior to doing those super maximal eccentrics would be, have a eccentric training base, having done lower loads, 70, 80%, 90%, working your way up prior to you getting those high loads. But you can do them, but it's just big risk, big reward. And understand if athletes start getting injured because of it, it might be your job on the line. So you just kind of have to be careful there. Always have a spot, as we know, safety first in the weight room. Always have a spot with the eccentric training, even if you're doing lower loads. It doesn't, my coach, it's only 65%. No, I don't need to spot them. No, spot. All right. Because you got to remember that time under tension. All right. You're stressing your muscles for a longer period of time than what they're typically used to. So if you're asking an athlete to do 6-second eccentric or 8 seconds or 5 seconds compared to just down up, let's say you're doing a set of 8 compared to a set of 3 with a 6-second eccentric. Well, a set of 8, just normal down up, no eccentric, no time on tension, no isometric, anything like that. I'm gonna be able to do that set done pretty quickly compared to if I do a set of 3 with a 6-second eccentric. That's probably gonna take me about 21 seconds because you got your 18 seconds of eccentrics, but then your concentric. So it's probably gonna take you about 21 seconds to do that set. And their body could give out on their second set on rep 2, or a third set rep 1. You just never know. Last thing you want is a barbell crashing down on a kid, squashing them. So make sure your spotters are locked in, focused, and paying attention, because you never know when that weight's going to give. Always follow the eccentric contraction with an explosive concentric contraction, just like demonstrated in that video. You want to be able to absorb the force, but then you want to explosively redirect the force. All right. So my second year at Manchester University, we're in our third week of eccentrics, and Manchester is a Division III school. So as you guys know, in Division III, it's just a lot different in the off season. In off-season training, we can't make mandatory. You're not allowed to make off-season training mandatory. You cannot take roll. You cannot punish kids if they don't show up. So it's it's for the love of the game. If the kids are going to show up and they want to get better, that are motivated, they're going to show up. If they don't, they're not going to show up. All right. So I had a kid who hadn't been showing up, and he decides to show up this week, and it's just our third week of eccentric training and about our 8th week of training. And we're doing dumbbell row, and I look over and I see him going up for 6 seconds and then coming down for 6 seconds. So I walk over to him, and the other guys standing around next to him are like, dude, what are you doing? Like, did you not pay attention earlier? It's up fast, down slow. So always make sure when you do eccentrics as well to demonstrate the exercise so they know what the eccentric phase is, they know what the concentric phase is, explain it, but then also demonstrate it. And do it every single week. It doesn't matter if it's your third week of doing it or your fourth week of doing it, or the fourth time you've done it that year. Just always refresh the kids, make sure they know, because you're going to have a kid or two that just, as we all know, just loses focus, doesn't pay attention, it's not paying attention. All right, so how to implement eccentric training. As I said before, first start off with your major muscle groups, your core lifts, compound exercises. But then as you get more experience, you can start to implement more of it into all your lifts. 1 to 2 days a week. Now you could do more, but again, you got to remember that high amount of stress getting placed upon your body, how taxing it is on the nervous system. That, if you're going 3 days a week, 4 days a week, man, your athlete's going to be sore. They're going to hate you, and they may not be able to recover from all that stress getting placed upon them. 2 to 3 week block phases. Now you could go 4, you could go 6, you could do more. That's really up to you. I prefer to stick with 2 to 3 weeks and kind of just change the adaptation, change the stress that we're placing on the kids every 2 or 3 weeks. Because again, I just think we're doing the same thing for 6 weeks in a row. The kids are going to get a little bored with it, get a little tired of it. So as I keep changing it up every 2 to 3 weeks, and add a different way to stress, from eccentric to isometrics, and then get some power stuff. I think the kids are just a little bit more engaging in the training from week to week. In season, we'll go about 2 weeks, and then in the off season, usually it's about 3. Sometimes we'll go 4, but usually about 3. Especially with eccentrics, if you're going 4 weeks, at that point too, I think the kids kind of get tired of it as well. But 2 to 4 phases a year. I'll always be on that 4 phases a year. So let's say I'm going 4 weeks of 4 phases of 3 weeks. That's 12 weeks. Well, those 52 weeks in the year. Well, we're going to train eccentrically year round. Well, coach, how are you training eccentrically year round when you're only going 12 weeks a year? Well, that's what those block phases where that's the main and number one focus. But with residual effects. All right. So with residual effects, you essentially have 30 days, plus or minus a few days here, really about 4 weeks of training, to where I could train essentially this week, and then I have about 4 weeks where I'll still maintain those benefits before I need to reintroduce that stress for a week. So let's say I'll go eccentric training. We'll do that for a 3-week phase or whatever, and then we'll move on to our isometrics and whatnot. But then after about 4 weeks, I'll come back and reintroduce eccentrics. We'll do eccentrics for a week, and then move on to whatever else that we got playing. By doing that, I could stick with my 2 to 3 week block phases, and have my 4 phases a year, but then slowly reintroduce eccentrics after every few weeks, and will allow us to really train eccentrically year round. All right. So I talk about the foundation in which the house is built on. All right. So that gives us a strong eccentric base throughout the whole year, a strong eccentric foundation to train throughout the year, to be able to absorb that force and to maintain those benefits throughout the year, and not just do it for 3 weeks and then come back to it 2 months later. All right. Where you lost a lot of that adaptation. Again, like I said at the beginning, I really do believe, and I love the triphasic stuff. I'm into that stuff. Again, that triphasic from Cal Dietz, strength coach over at University of Minnesota. Again, I was into eccentrics and all that stuff prior to knowing who he was and prior to reading triphasic, but I really didn't know if I was doing it the best way, if I was implementing the best way, if there's a better way to do it. So I really got to thank Coach Meyer, who's a track strength coach over at Florida State University. He was the one that kind of introduced me to the triphasic and Cal Dietz and stuff like that. And I got the book. And so I'm going to kind of talk about how you can implement eccentric. I'm going to talk about the triphasic philosophy, but then afterwards, after a couple of slides, I'll talk about how to implement eccentric outside of that triphasic philosophy. Whether triphasic might be for you, it might not. It's really up to you to determine. But so here's the chart, a basic chart. He has a few different cycles. So from here, you have a above 80%, you have an 80 to 55%, and you have a below 55%. So you notice at 55% and lower, he does no eccentrics. And the reason for that is, you can, but it's just eccentrics are best with heavier weight as far as the adaptation and the benefits. So once you start getting those lower loads for him, it's just like, it's just not worth it. The adaptation that you're going to get, it's not as good as if you're training at 70% or 80%. So, and again, we talk about the maximum absorption of force. Are you absorbing maximum force if you're playing at 55%, 50%, 40%, 30%, compared to 80%, 85, 100, 90%, so forth. All right. So the higher the load, the less time on the tension. The lower the load, the more time on the tension. So you can see from here, we go from 5 to 6 seconds to 6 to 8 seconds. All right. And the triphasic philosophy, it's really based on quality sets, quality reps. It's not how many reps can I get with this percentage. All right. So you look at this, you see 70%. Right here, he has 4 to 5 reps, 4 to 5 sets. Well, he's like, well, I could do 70% more than 4 to 5 reps. All right. Yes. And he acknowledges that in the book too, but he's like, I want good, efficient, quality reps. That's what this program triphasic is really about. All right. So with the higher loads, you can see you got low rep ranges, anywhere from 1 to 3 reps. Then with the lower loads, anywhere from 3 to 6, just depending on the percentage you're playing with. But then same thing with the sets. The higher the load, the less sets. The lower the load, the more sets that we could do. So we go from anywhere from 1 to 6 sets, just depending on the load. All right, and now we'll break this down even further. So here's a 4-day model, a 3-day model, and a 2-day model of the triphasic philosophy, what it looks like. So 4 days, it's really a 4-day split, 2 days upper body, 2 days lower body. All right. So day 1, lower body, 82.5% to 87.5% with eccentrics applied. Day 2, upper body, 82.5% to 87.5% with eccentrics applied. Day 3, lower body, 92.5 to 97.5, no eccentrics. And day 4 is upper body with the same percentage, 92.5 to 97.5% with no eccentrics. So your volume is from your day 1 and day 2 with these eccentrics, but then also from the fact you're training 4 days. So that's where that volume comes with that model. Because as you saw from that chart, all right, all this is 80% and above. So the amount of reps and sets you're doing are going to be low. All right. Because it's about quality reps. All right. But day 3 and day 4, those are your big go big or go home days. Those are really your singles. All right. Sets of 1. All right. No eccentrics applied. Go big or go home. Let's load up the bar and let's get after it. All right. Your other days, day 1 and day 2, all right, those are your volume days, your eccentrics applied, all right. But again, it's still 82.5 to 87.5%. All right, you can play with that a little bit if you wanted to make it progressive. All right, you go week 1, 82.5%, week 2, 85%, week 3, 87.5%. If you want to play within that range, give them 82 to 85 for this week, and the next week 85 to 87. That's really up to you. But those are the loads percentage wise or what they play with on those days. So a 3-day model, all right, it changes. All right. Now on a 3-day model, all 3 days are total body. All right. Day 1, you have your 82.5 to 87.5% with your eccentrics are applied. Your day 2 is your go big or go home day, 92.5% to 97.5% with no eccentrics. Day 3, this is your volume day, all right, 75 to 80% with your eccentrics are applied. So, day 3 being your volume day, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing 8 to 12 reps, all right? It's really just adding 2 or 3 reps than what you did on day 1, all right? Because again, it's all about quality reps, quality, efficient, explosive, powerful reps. You don't want reps where you're overcompensating, your technique's breaking down, and it's taking you 5 seconds to get the barbell up, and so forth. All right. Day 2, it's kind of more like an in-season of what it would look like in season, depending on your sport, how many days you guys get going in season. But day 1 is total body, 82.5% to 87.5% with the eccentrics. Day 2 is lower body, 92.5% to 97.5% with no eccentrics. Now, like I said, I do love the triphasic stuff. I do follow it, and I do implement it here and there. I don't always follow it to a T. I will do something slightly different. An example of that would be on day 2. I personally, when I do that, I'll have my athletes go total body on both days. And just for me, I just don't like training upper body once a week. If I want to get gains and keep getting stronger, I don't want to train that body part just once a week. So I'm gonna train it twice. If you could just stay on mute so it doesn't affect the presentation, everyone else could hear still. One moment. All right, there we go. Share. All right. From current slide. And then what I also do with my athletes is, it says 82.5 to 87.5%. Let's say on this week we're playing with 85%. What do we know about athletes? They all don't recover the same, right? Some athletes get a lot more sleep, better quality sleep. Some athletes eat a lot healthier than others, take care of their stretching and mobility work. So if the athlete comes in and he's struggling that day and he can't handle that 85% or that 82.5% or whatever percentages that we're working at, if we're doing a volume day or a go big or home go day, I'll give them about a 5% buffer zone. And if it's real bad, maybe up to 10%, use about 5%. Like, okay, well, you can't handle 82.5% too much today. All right, let's go 77. 85 is too much, drop down to 80. All right. Or if they're really feeling it and like, coach, man, that was easy. That was nothing. All right. Well, push yourself, go up, go above that 87.5%. All right. You're at 92.5%. All right. Let's go up, push it a little bit today. And the reason I do that is just because, I don't ever want to stop an athlete from pushing himself. Now it's within reason. I'm not going to allow him to jump 15% or anything like that. And have a chance to get hurt. So it's really just in reason, but I want my athletes to be motivated. I want my athletes to have self-motivation, be competitive, to push themselves in the weight room, because that makes my job easy. Who doesn't want athletes that are competitive and motivated and push or self-motivated and pushing themselves? So I'll give them that little buffer zone to play with. If they're feeling it, they can push themselves and go higher than percentage listed for that day or for that week. But then if they're struggling, if they haven't fully recovered, if they can't handle it, they're just going to get hurt. If I force them trying to do that weight. So, okay, let's get some quality training in. So let's load the percentage, even if it's below than what's listed for that weight, for that week or that day. All right. So this is ways to implement eccentric outside of that triphasic philosophy. So if you don't necessarily like that triphasic stuff, then that's fine. Here's ways to implement eccentric training. So just the basic eccentric emphasis. So 3 to 4 second eccentric followed by a 1 second concentric contraction. So, and you can make this progressive as well. You could go like week 1, I go 3 seconds. Week 2, we go 4 seconds with the eccentric phase. Week 3, we go 5 seconds. Or you could go week 1, we go 3 to 4 seconds. Week 2, we go 5 to 6. Week 3, we go 7 to 8. There's different ways you could play with that in the training. But as we know, we want training to be progressive, right? We always want to get better and progress. Then you have your super maximals. So this is going above 100%, which you can do. I've seen studies that have said as much as 130%. All right. But again, with this, it's big risk, big reward. All right. The last thing you want is an athlete tearing a pec because you're training at 120% on the bench press, or you get multiple athletes that get hurt during this phase or something like that. It might be your job on the line, especially this day and age. You get an athlete gets hurt, he's not going to be happy. The parents not going to be happy. The coach is not going to be happy. Multiple athletes get hurt. The coach ain't going to be happy. And then at that point, it could be your job on the line. So safety first. But again, if you can do this, I would say make sure you've trained eccentrically before and you've played with lower loads in the 80%, 90% prior to going super maximal. Because otherwise, big risk, big reward, but also with big risk, you have an injury, and we don't want that. I personally have not got a chance to do a lot of super maximal training. I know when I was at Manchester, we were going to start to dab into that. But then what happened? COVID, and they kicked us off campus. And so that put an end to that. But I've known some coaches who have done that. As I mentioned, Coach Myra over at Florida State University, the track coach for strength coach for track over there. He's dabbed into the stuff and has liked the gains that he has seen from it. So you just got to be careful, and also spot, especially if you're going to have play with lows of that high. The other method, you got your 2 up, 1 down method. So this is kind of limiting. As you see here, it says 40 to 50%. If you want to go a little higher, you can, but it's really more limiting on the exercise that you can do. All right. So there's 2 ways to do it. You have the alternating method and you have your same side method. All right. So the alternating method would be, let's say I'm doing a leg press. All right. I press up on 2 legs. I lower on my right leg. I press up on 2 legs. I lower on my left leg. I press up on 2, lower on my right. So always changing that eccentric, the limb that you're using each time, going from right and left. The same side method would be, all right, I press up on 2, I lower on my right. I press up on 2, lower on my right. Press up on 2, lower on my right. Do my set there, and then do my next set with lower on 2, press up on 2, lower on my left. All right. So that's the alternating method. That's the same side method. As you can see, it's just going to kind of limit you to what exercises you can do with that method. But those are 3 different ways that you can implement eccentric training without or outside of that triphasic philosophy. The repeated bout effect. So this is something you might want to do prior to starting an eccentric phase. And this is really to try to reduce that delayed onset muscle soreness, that high stress that you can really get with eccentric training. And all it really is, the repeated bout effect is, let's say I start eccentric training, my eccentric phase next week. This week, I want to slowly implement some eccentric training to try to force some adaptation, prior to starting it. So introduce the body, introduce the stress prior to going full go into that next week. So let's say I'm doing bench press, 3 sets. All right. Well, your first 2 sets are normal. Do it as it says, as you want it done that week, your sets and however you're doing it. But in that 3rd set, all right, you're going to reduce the load a little bit, and then you're going to do it eccentrically. All right. So that's a way to start to introduce that stress onto the body, to try to force a little bit of adaptation prior to going full go into that next week. So that's one way to kind of reduce that stress, because again, you just got to remember, eccentric training is very, very stressful on the body, very taxing. Kids who haven't done it, kids have been on a long layoff, you got to know, hey, it's going to be a lot stressful than what you're typically used to if you haven't done it before. Just know you can be a little sore than usual, but that might be one way to be able to combat that stress and just get a little less stress that following week when you fully go into it, because you have some adaptation. Working the floor. All right. So implementing eccentric training, how do you work the floor? All right. How do you monitor the athletes to make sure that they're being held accountable? to the time on detention and so forth. All right. Well, there's multiple ways to do it, and it was really what's best for you, what you feel comfortable, what works for you. One way to do it is it's on the athlete. All right. I don't necessarily like this way because it's really at this point it's on the honor system. All right. So if I'm the athlete and I'm back squatting, and coach says, "Hey, we're doing 6-second eccentric," now I got to count in my head, or count out loud as I'm doing it. Well, what happens? Usually the athlete counts too fast, right? You ask him 6-second eccentric, he could probably do 2.5 second, 3 second if you're lucky. So now you're not really getting that maximum time on attention that you want. All right. All right. So another way to do it, it's on the partner. So you've got a group of 2 or a group of 3. One athlete's doing the lift while the other athlete is counting them down, whether with or without a stopwatch. I'd prefer a stopwatch because if you don't have a stopwatch, then what happens is the athlete that's counting them down is going to count too fast. All right. His 6 seconds is going to be a lot slower or a lot faster than my 6 seconds. All right. I always tip when I do it, if I don't have a stopwatch, then I'm going to be like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Athletes play neighborhood football. They're going to be going 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi. All right. Well, was that a true 6 seconds? No. All right. So you can put a stopwatch into their hand. If you don't have stopwatches, or if the athletes don't have their own watches, as we all know, most of them have watches, then you can allow them to pull out the phones and do it off the phone. And I've done that before and allowed them to use the phones, but I let them know, hey, it's strictly the time. If I catch you doing anything else on that phone for any other reason, all right, we'll punish the whole team. All right. But preferably if you have the partner do it, have them use a stopwatch. All right. The third way is on the coach. All right. So let's say, with your high school or a small college and there's only you don't have an assistant or anything. Okay. Then at that point it's on the coach. All right. All the athletes are doing the exercise at one time and you're counting them down with the stopwatch. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or 5, 4, 3, you're counting them down. Okay. Well, that's a good way to get all the athletes going at the same time, but that takes away from you working the floor and doing what we're supposed to be doing, coaching. All right. Monitoring the technique, telling the guy, all right, well, you got to slow down. All right. You're going too fast. Widen your feet, chest up, head up. All right. It's hard to coach and run the clock at the same time. So the best way that I think is if you have multiple coaches, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a coach. It could be an injured athlete or volunteer or just someone else that monitors the clock and that's counting the athletes down on a stopwatch while the other coach is actually working the floor, coaching technique, correcting technique, holding guys accountable, guys that are going too fast, making sure they slow down a little bit more and so forth. Me personally, I think that's the best way to do it when you're working the floor and doing eccentric training or even isometrics or any time on attention. But really, again, it really comes back to what works for you, what your preference is, and what you feel works for you with what you have. So that's essentially the presentation. Those are my references. Again, that's my contact information. I got multiple emails. That's my school email. That's my personal email. That's my phone number. There's my Twitter. You feel free to always reach out to me on anything. It doesn't have to be eccentric training. It could be on isometrics. It could be on any other type of training. I love this stuff. I love networking. I love talking about strength and conditioning and profession and spitballing. I know I have personally grown as a strength coach tremendously through networking and meeting with other coaches and sit down and clinicking with them and going to clinics and signing up for clinics and so forth and just talking shop. That has helped me tremendously. I could tell you prior to getting into strength conditioning full time, I thought I knew strength and conditioning because, when I was a young coach and, more on the football side and because I was always strong in high school and in college and, I know the basics and I know technique, this and that. And I thought I knew strength conditioning. But then when I really got into strength conditioning full time, that's all I did. I started meeting with other strength coaches and going to clinics and watching these guys who've done it professionally for 20 years and learning under them. I tell people, for me, it was like, in the movie Avengers, where Dr. Selvig sees Loki, and Loki asks him, what has the Tesseract told you? He's like, oh man, it's so much more than power. It's knowledge. And for me, that's what's really been like in strength and conditioning when I've gotten out to these clinics and talk to the other coaches and network and professional development. In my growth as a strength coach was like, wow, I thought I knew strength and conditioning. No, I was an amateur at best. I was an idiot. And so very thankful to learn under Coach Pick and these other coaches I've got to work with and under, and then coaches that I've got to connect with through professional development and reaching out. So feel free to reach out to me. If you got any questions, feel free to ask right now, or mention it in the chat. All right, if there's no questions, I don't see. I'm gonna check and see if coaches reach back out to me if anything happened. All right, well, I don't see coach logged in, and I haven't heard from him. So I appreciate everyone's time and coming in today. Typically how long are your eccentrics? It will vary, but typically 6 seconds is what I'll tell the kids on eccentrics. 6 seconds, but I will, with some athletes, especially my beginning athletes and younger athletes and high school kids that I train as well, is I'll start with 3 seconds just to slowly introduce the stress, get into it, so it's not too taxing compared to going 6 seconds. But typically I'll go 6 seconds. I know some coaches that will go 8 seconds as well, and I've heard 10 seconds. But typically, once we really get into the cuff of things, we'll go 6 seconds eccentrics. And I would prefer it to be on a stopwatch, whether his partner has a stopwatch, or if I'm running the stopwatch or another coach is, just because, as I said, if you don't do it on stopwatch and you're counting it down, the athlete is going to go much faster, or if the partner's counting it down, he's going to count too fast. And what happens too with the stopwatch is, let's say you're going 6 seconds, the athlete will go, and he'll be like, man, coach, what are you talking about? That ain't 6 seconds. That was like 20 seconds. That's way too long. And then you stop and you're like, no, look at that. Look at that. What stopwatch say? 6 seconds in like 0.1 millisecond or something like that, So, but definitely on the stopwatch, but typically my sensor is about 6 seconds long. If you got more questions, feel free to ask, or just type in the chat. I do appreciate everyone tuning in and helping us out, because like I said, this is for my boys and girls weightlifting programs. Again, you've probably heard of Destin, Florida. So it's a big tourist spot here in the Panhandle, like #1 area. So very blessed to be able to work in Destin. And we have the luxury of the school is literally across the street from the beach. So that's awesome. But we're a second-year high school. Destin has never had a high school until last year, and we're first year with the weightlifting program. As I said, second year school, and our weight room is just literally supposed to be our weight room's built and the flooring's in. The weights are supposed to come in on Monday. And so what they've been doing since is all summer, we've been in all summer and all fall and winter, we've been going to a CrossFit down the street about 5 minutes away, and we get on the bus, we load up to go over there, and then I train the kids and we rent that out. So very thankful for you guys to tune in, so we can raise some money, and it's gonna allow me to do some things for my boys and girls teams and do some things for them, and get us some more weights and equipments and trap bars and stuff like that we don't currently have for our weight that's being built. So again, if you got any questions, let me know. Feel free to exit whenever you want. Now I have recorded all these presentations, so what I'm going to do is I will upload them onto a private YouTube page. Then I will send you the link to that page so you could get on there and review these videos and watch anything that you need. Again, and I apologize for not being able to get you that extra session, but I'll still try hard to get that to you. If I'm able to get that, I'll get that recorded and I'll upload it on that page and make sure you get that as well. If I can't, I'll let you know. I appreciate those that said don't worry about refunding the money. Thank you very much. But if you would like that prorated refund for not getting that 6th session, then let me know, and I'll still refund you. Just shoot me an email, and I'll make sure I get that back to you. But other than that, if you got any questions, let me know. Feel free to reach out to me. And when I get all these videos uploaded, I should probably get it done by tomorrow. I'll send a mass email out to everybody. And then if there's any issues with that online, with the upload on the videos online, it's not playing, let me know, and I'll take care of it, and I'll make sure everything's good to go, and you guys get what you need. So right now, you'll receive 0.5 CUs. If I'm able to get that extra presentation from Coach, because I'm going to try to reach out to him and see if he'll just sit down with me and we'll go one-on-one, and I'll record a session and then I'll upload it. If that's the case, then you'll get 6, and I'll let you know. If I can't get that done, then it'll be 5. So I'll keep you guys updated on that, so you report the accurate CEUs. Last thing I want is anyone to get in trouble with the NSCA or anything like that. So if you need a certificate, I'll be able to get those to you as well. It'll take me a little bit, but I'll be able to get those, and I can email them or mail them out. Just let me know as well. But it should be category A. See, as far as when you report your CEUs, and then you click on a non NSCA event or something like that. But you'd get 0.5 CEUs right now. If I get you that extra one, I'll let you know. But if you don't got any questions, thank you for your time. Very appreciative. It's my hope that you were able to pick up at least one thing from each presentation that you could take back to your athletes. And with that being said, hope everyone had a great Christmas, and wish everyone Happy New Year, and wish everyone the best with their programs and their training. So thank you very much, and have a great day.